Right, just want to get that done. All right, go ahead.
Welcome. We have now started the recording. Thank you. To repeat the initial introductions, John Weed is president, Washington Township Historical Society, welcoming you to the meeting of the 25th of March, 2024.
You guys want to come forward?
Our,
Can't do that. We're gonna do it here.
we have
Sure.
a total of 5 here in the at the Museum of Local History. It's the intersection of Ellsworth and Anson. So our speaker this evening is Tim Swenson, who serves a number of positions both in the Museum of Local History and also Washington Township Historical Society. First of all, is there any other business that someone would like to bring to the attention of the community? We have one.
All right, so hold on a second. I need to unmute. That was muted. You picked it. You picked it up on mine, so.
Hi, this is Patty Lacey, and I'm your representative to the Patterson House Advisory Committee. We are the two local historical groups, the Washington Township Historical Society and the Mission Peak Heritage, thank you, Heritage. Each has 2 members on the Patterson House Board. Currently, each group only has 1 rep. Thank you. There's been feedback here. Okay, I don't have to listen to that. So each group currently has only 1 representative on the board, and we need to have 2. I'm asking anyone out there as a member of the Washington Township Historical Society if they would like to serve on the board. It meets every other month, 3rd Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Usually the meetings is 7 to 9. And currently we've been meeting PM. Currently we've been meeting over at City Hall. So it's an easy drive and easy parking. The meetings are interesting. We do help make decisions on the interior of the house, taking care of it, refurbishing, etc. The only requisite currently is that you must be a resident of the city of Fremont. So if anybody out there would like to join this merry band, please let me know and we will run you by the president and vice president and make recommendations. Thank you very much.
Well, we've had some technical issues, but I believe we're recording. And let me now at this point ask Tim Swenson to talk about the Pioneer newspaper of Alvarado. Recall newspapers?
All right, so I've got people live here. I'm on my laptop. I'm hoping I can talk without being too loud for the folks online. So I'm going to put the laptop a little further away. If someone wants to ping me in chat or something, if it's not loud enough or too loud, let me know. For those folks that are here, we can't get the projector working, so I'm going to use this monitor. So if you can't read it, come up a little closer. Unless Bruce wants to take a look on that machine. They changed the windows. I can't do multiple monitors, not detecting it. So anyhow, let me go ahead and just start. You should be seeing, yeah, you're seeing that there. All right, that's good. I'm seeing something different from mine. All right, so let's just go ahead and talk. So what I'm going to talk about is George Oakes. Actually, I should put down George H. Oakes and the Alvarado Pioneer newspaper. Obviously, the newspaper was from Alvarado, which is now part of Union City. All right, so George H. Oakes, born in Hayward, November 21st, 1888. His father was George A. Oakes. There's a trend here you'll see on the next on his son. His mother was Emma Peterman. I'm not sure if there's where's Peterman down in Mount Eden. I'm not sure if she's really that family or not. So yeah, we have a problem with the projector, by the way, for someone who just walked in. So his father bought the Hayward Journal in 1882 and ran it. I've also heard it called the Hayward Weekly Journal or the Hayward Journal, one of the two. It gives the Library of Congress, and it says that's when it started, but they don't know exactly when it ended. George H. started the journal as a paper boy. He wanted to do other things. Not too exactly sure when that newspaper ended, but George H. did kind of grow up in the newspaper business with his father. There we go. He graduated from UC Berkeley in 1913. In 1917, he's living at home at 941 A Street. I believe that address no longer exists, or they changed it. He was listed as a publisher and job printer in co-partnership with his mother. Now, where I got this information was his World War I, essentially draft card is what you want to call it, inductee card, where during World War I you have to fill out if you're going to get drafted. Here's what your information. So that was his address then in 1917, and his jobs. He married Pauline Pennebaker. Don't know exactly when, but his first daughter was born in 1919. So I'm guessing somewhere about 1918 roughly is when he got married, because if depending on when she was born, it could be late in the year. So 1918, 1919, maybe late in 1817, something in that time frame when he got married. His second child was George P. Oakes. So we have a George A, his father, George H, the guy we're talking about, and his son George P. I think if George P had a son, he may have made him George Z or something. It had, they're going, we got the A, the H, the P. What's next in the alphabet? They skipped a bit. And his last daughter, Muriel, was born in 1923. So he was in the newspaper business, and he started his own newspaper business. He founded the Livermore Journal in 1920. Library of Congress lists the Livermore Journal as being closed in about 1933. Trusting that with a bit of grain of salt. And we do know that he sold the Livermore Journal sometime before it closed. Obviously, you're not going to sell it after it closes. So again, Library of Congress listed as being closed around 1933. So obviously he sold it sometime before then. We don't have any dates for that. He founded the Alvarado Pioneer, either 1925 or 1929. I've got a couple different dates. I even have a date. So someone in another source says 1930s, but I know it was actually before that. Oh, by the way, both of these journals were weeklies. They weren't dailies, and most at the time, everything newspaper-wise at that time was a weekly. There wasn't enough news for a daily. 1940s, he was working at the Berkeley Daily Gazette, living on 192 Main Street, Hayward. How do we know? So what happened in the 1940s? You have to fill paperwork out for. Sure. Exactly. So just like in 1917, in the 1940s, he had to fill out draft paperwork. And that's where he listed as working at the Berkeley Daily Gazette and living on Main Street in Hayward, 192 Main Street. I think the addresses have changed so that those addresses don't actually match up with the current numbers. They're only 3 digits, and they might have gone to 4 digits. So I don't have a way of tying those up right away.
Screen here. This slide is not in your.
All right. So let's move on. So after World War II, he purchased the Washington News. I've heard it called a number of things. Washington Township Register News. So I'm going by what he was listed in his obituary. He bought the Washington News. He founded the New York Times in 1948, and he founded the New Milpitas Star. He went into business with Stuart Nixon and George Oakes, his son, George P. Oakes, 1954. They did the Township Register and the Newark Express. Township Register, I think, I'm not sure exactly when it started, but there was also some sort of name changes along the way. He bought Stuart Nixon out in 1956. He sold the newspaper in 1967. From the Township Register comes basically the Argus. That's really the foundation. If you look at the history of the paper, it goes back to the Township Register. Possibly there's the Washington News, some.
Was the News Register in there? Because the News Register was the paper in the area when I was a kid.
They could have
That's what
changed the
I'm
name from
thinking.
Township Register to News Register.
That's what I'm thinking.
I have seen where they list Washington News and Washington Township Register News. The Library of Congress kind of has them listed together. So I'm thinking that there was, like you said that was the News Register?
News register.
Okay. There could have been some name changes along the way. I didn't go into great detail into how we got to the Argus and then on now to the East Bay Times. So. Luckily, we have at least one copy of the Livermore Journal. I got this from the Library of Congress has a database of newspapers. There's also the California Digital Newspaper Archive as another source for old newspapers. Library of Congress is also, I think they changed the name, but it used to be called Chronicling America. And any newspaper prior to 1923 was perfectly free game because 1923 is the start of copyright. Anything after 23, but now they're adding more stuff into their database after 1923. So this is 1925, the Livermore Journal. I probably can't see it there. Let's see if there's anything here about. Set this aside a minute. And this one, unfortunately, does not show who the publisher is. Some of the other, what's the title called? Masthead. That's the right one. Shows the publisher. This one does not. Our slogan, the hometown paper for newspaper folks. Those of you online could probably read this. Those here probably can't, other than the Livermore Journal. So let's see what's going on here. Board issues 3,000 bond issue for sewer and paving. This is all again out for Livermore. Bids for paving of Hospital Road are called. Coral situation is investigated by rail official. Coral Hollow, maybe out Livermore. Not too sure. So let's move on. This is the Washington News. This is in Centerville. There was, the other one was out in the Township Register, I think was in Niles. This one most people who know anything about local history probably all seen this particular issue. It's all over. It's where we get a lot of information about Washington Township. This is the sesquicential 150-year anniversary of Washington, of Mission San Jose, 1947, if I remember correctly. And this is just the front page. It's a larger print, and a lot of the photographs from the 40s we have in Washington Township come from this particular issue. I think there's seen multiple copies in locations. Most local museums have copies. It's everywhere. Everyone, when you talk about this issue, everyone who does locus knows about this issue. That's the only thing I can really find in Washington News archived. Except for this one. Staff of Washington News put out big edition. I think actually this is from this one. I believe it says here, Mrs. Sloan does fine work as associate publisher. Editor Oakes wants to thank Mrs. Sloan for fine historical work, so on. I believe the gentleman on the right is actually George H. Oakes. I don't have a whole lot of photographs of him, but that I believe that's that is him listed there. It also says Evangeline Betancourt, office manager of news, and so on. You'll find that newspapers like to put a lot of stuff in that was all very, very local, very, very minor, because they need to fill space. So if you're the type of person that had someone over for the weekend, it's probably going to get in the newspaper if the newspaper found out about it. This is the Township Register. See, here it says here, serving Washington Township in Southern County since 1888. George H. Oakes, publisher, but Stuart Nixon is editor. Obviously, this is an edition in the 50s because that's when they went into combined business. And notice they're saying that published every Thursday morning, 748 First Street in Niles, Alameda County, California. Entered a second-class mail matter in the post office in Niles. So this one's actually based out of Niles. Okay, so keep admitting people. I keep people it's actually getting dropped out here. So, all right. So let's talk about George himself. Actually running pretty quick here, but that's all right. So he did mention, one thing mentioned in his obituaries, he founded the Kiwanis clubs in Fremont, Newark, and Union City. I don't know if I don't think the Newark and Union City Kiwanis clubs still exist. I think the Fremont one existed. Don't know exactly when. I'm going to guess probably after World War II, but it could be early. It's not really listed anywhere. And I couldn't find anything on the Kiwanis clubs listing how they got founded. Yes, Bruce.
Two of those cities didn't exist until the 50s and 60s.
You're right. So, well, Union City in 59. So sometime after that. He said he was the president of the Hayward Parlor of the Native Sons of the Golden West. I'm not sure if this organization still exists. I knew that the Native Sons of the Golden West did exist in Alvarado because the old Oddfellows building had there's a picture from the 30s or 40s or thereabouts of the old Oddfellows building down here. It said IOF at the very top, then Ancient Order of United Workmen, AOUW, and NSGW, Native Sons of the Golden West. So all three fraternal organizations met in that building and shared it together. Eventually, the building became a home for the Eagles, the Alvarado Eagles, and I think Airy is the term for their lodge or organization. So, but I don't know if the Native Sons of the Golden West is still in existence. Again, these were fraternal organizations, very common back. Oddfellows started in Alvarado, 1860s, very popular in the 1880s, but later in life, they kind of fell out of favor. He was a member of the Eagles Lodge. He was active in the Hayward Area Historical Society, much like when they started. He passed away in May 6, 1976, and previously his wife passed away in 1970. So 1888 to 1976, a good long life. So let's talk about the Alvarado Pioneer. This is basically the masthead, leading vegetable and fruit producing area of California, home of Holly Sugar and Leslie Salt Corporations. So obviously this was in the later 30s because Holly Sugar didn't really buy or lease the sugar factory until about that time. They actually leased it for a year or two, a couple seasons, and they just bought it outright. So some others is that the Holly Sugar got started here. No, it got started in Colorado. And notice the leading vegetable and fruit production. Vegetables play a key part of the newspaper as far as their reporting goes. We'll see that in some issues. So founded either 1925 or 1929. I have a couple different dates on that. Mrs. George H. Oakes listed as publisher. I'm guessing in those days you listed everything by your husband's name, not much your name. So you were Mrs. whatever your husband was. So he's always listed as Mrs. George H. Oakes as the publisher. It was housed in a small building on Levy Street, which is now Union City Boulevard. We know that A.J. Cadero ran the printing press, and the printing press was on site in this little building. We do know from an issue, I happened to go look through the issues, that December 1939, they added the horse cart house to the building. This might have been an old firehouse that had a horse cart fire truck. There's discussion, there's some documentation on a very early fire department, like 1910 or thereabouts, was a horse-drawn cart, and it was stored in a building down in Alvarado. By 39, they had already built or just building the Alvarado firehouse which was a brick firehouse, and they actually had a real firehouse at that point, a little front entrance and a 2-bay garage. So obviously they no longer needed it, probably dumped the horse cart fire thing, because who in the 30s still had a horse-drawn cart for firefighting? So I'm guessing they then just took the building and added it to the old building. Not uncommon in Alvarado to look into the 1910s, 1920s, instead of them demolishing a building. Let's say you bought a piece of property, you want to rebuild a new house, you didn't demolish the existing house, you just picked it up and moved it. So it was very common to see people talking about how Union City down at the end of Horner Street, as that kind of fell out of favor, people just pick homes up and move it buy a plot of land over in New Haven, Alvarado area, and just pick up the house and move it. So very common to see that happen. And of course, that was reported like, oh, yeah, so-and-so moved it from this house to that property, because everyone knew that's where this was, or the old Smith house, or the old that, because that's everyone knew at the time. Don't worry about 100 years down the road. August 1940, they bought a brand new press. The old press was a Campbell press and used for 10 years. I couldn't find much on a Campbell press. It was sold to Washington Union High School. I'm assuming they used it for probably their student newspaper or whatever publishing news they had at that time. The new press apparently could do 4 pages at a time. So most of the issues we have are after 1940, and they are the typical broadside where it's fairly decent size, almost about the same size as your modern newspaper, or just a touch smaller, I think.
Newspapers have been reduced in size these last few decades.
Well, I know that looking at what I've got at home, it's okay, maybe about the same, but it's all printed 4 pages onto a single sheet of paper. So that's what the new press they said they could do, was do 4 pages at a time. So. Uh, 1940, George P. Oakes was listed as editor. This is the Sun. Then in 1943, Mrs. George H. was listed as editor and publisher. George P. was listed as ensign. Because in 1943, he joined the Navy, became an ensign, and went and joined the Navy. So obviously he was no longer available to become a publisher. So, and of course, when your parents own the newspaper and something like this happens, you get your picture in the paper, as we'll see later. And this ain't gonna last too long, but all right. So there's probably one of our better photographs of the Alvarado Pioneer. Obviously, this was taken much later, after they closed. So this is probably in the early 60s, maybe a little bit later than that. The building is definitely showing its age at this time. You can still see where it says Alvarado Pioneer Printing under the fireworks sign. And the car, we can't really judge the age of the car. Car looks like from its 40s, but okay, so I'm hoping I'm still sharing. Let me just do one thing here real quick. I just want to check chat, make sure there's no one chatting. Okay. All right. Some people, would be pinging me on chat that something's going on. All right. Oh. Okay. No one on chat. Me. All right. So this is the second photograph. There's only 2 photographs of this building. This is really the second photograph we have of the building. It's obviously slightly better condition, but the quality photograph isn't quite as good. But obviously this is, again, much later after they closed. We'll talk about location in a minute. In fact, we'll do that next. Not the best quality image. Let's see, I see something here. Oh, okay, see, Paul, your question, anybody know, so Paul's question was showing up there, but not on me, is who was the first publisher of the Daily Review? Anybody remember right off? I know the Sparks family owned it in the 80s. They owned the Daily Review and the Argus, but I don't know who owned it prior to that. So I don't think we really know here, Paul. So, not the, you probably can't see it, but it's not the best photograph. This is actually an old Sanborn map from the 1944, blown up. But I'm going to point out here, this is the Alvarado Hotel. Let me know that this is Smith Street right here, and this is Union City Boulevard. I'm going to highlight it here online. See my mouse move. This is the Autos Alvarado Hotel here. Alvarado Hotel is still there. It's being redone. The far right is the corners, Smith Street and Union City Boulevard. Notice also, if you look at the autos right next to it, right here, it says printing. So that's the where the print shop was. Where it is now a road. If you drive, so if you were driving down Levy Street or Union City Boulevard back before 1976, I believe, you're standing coming from Fremont, you look straight down the street, you will see a gas station there. You know, if you're to drive straight and not turn, you'd plow right into the gas station. Well, in 76, they shut down the entire west side of Levy Street, Union City Boulevard, and widened the road. So now you've got 2 lanes, a little median, and then 2 lanes. where the second two lanes are on the west side is where the old buildings used to be. They also straightened the curve in Union City Boulevard. It used to be a very sharp curve to go over a bridge, 1890s thereabouts, and then on into Hayward, because there was a creek running through. They rerouted the creek, so they basically left the curve, left the curve there, but just took out the bridge because no longer needed, the creek's gone. But then now it's a very gentle curve. So if you were driving on Union City Boulevard heading north, you would basically drive over this gas station or where the print shop is. So long gone, plowed under. So everything pretty much you see, like there's, if you look over the far left, there's, I think it says auto supplies, that's also gone. So everything on here is gone except for the Alvarado Hotel. And then again, that's now at the corner of Smith and Union City Boulevard, and it's more gentle curves. That really has taken out most of everything there. The one part of the gas station, you're probably not part of the roadway, but half of it is. So I'm not sure what the VAC stands for, but, and there's something else there, something I can't read it, it's just too small. I've got other Sanborn maps, but they're older and do not show, I think they stopped in like 1908, so they're not going to show this building being there. Yeah, and I don't even know if the building existed prior to the foundation of the Alvarado Pioneer. It might have, it may not have been. It might have been just repurposed and moved or something. Really don't know. All right, so the newspaper, it folded in 1954. There was a collection of issues given to the city of Union City. So basically, as they closed, some years later after the city was founded, I saw mentioned on some newspaper that the Oaks family, who still had their collection of newspapers. So basically, a lot of newspapers keep old copies around. When I worked out a little more independent, they kept every single copy running around for historical purposes to go back and look up. They didn't have anything on digitized yet, so you kept a hard copy. Sometimes, like we've got some up here that are up here. You see up there, they're bound hard copies, and they would then bind them either to store. They can then go back and refer to them. It's their, well, just like they have a photo morgue, it's probably like their newspaper morgue, where they kept old photographs and old newspapers. So at one point, the Oaks family gave it to the city of Union City. I have documentation of that. I ran across them at the Union City Library, probably about 2008, thereabouts. Where I was talking to the librarian, got them from this. Oh yeah, we have these old issues of this newspaper here. Previously, I had been looking for the Alvarado Pioneer, and there was one copy at UC Berkeley that I could find online, Library of Congress. You look online, and there's one copy of the newspaper at UC Berkeley on microfiche. That was it. No other library or other university had copies. I did, when I was at the Union City Historical Museum, I did run across some people who had some copies, and a few people had taken them and not laminated, but real close to lamination, something slightly lighter than lamination, but something similar. It's not quite those. Remember those old seal things, put the food in, the vacuum seals? Something kind of like that, but again, not laminated, not hard lamination. So we had some copies there. And then I ran across them at the Union City Library. And I'm like, wow, you've got an entire collection. They have issues from 1938 to 1954. There's a few gap years, but there's still a lot there. In 2009, Union City was 50th anniversary. I was involved in that. I was the historical committee chair for the historical committee. And at the end in 2010, when we were finishing up, we had some money left over. There was one event we did not hold, so we had budgeted for it. We had some money left over. I'm not sure how much, something like 8,000 or 9,000, something like that. And we're looking at how to spend this money. I'm like, oh, look, we've got these old newspapers that no one's archived. Can we get these digitized? So 50th anniversary team sent them to Utah for scanning. There's a company there that will scan entire newspapers. They have all the technology, something they do all the time. And what you get back is either a thumb drive or a couple of DVD ROMs of the digital images. They come in format of PDF, JP2, and TIFF. I think JP2 is slightly higher, but less easier. TIFF is strictly a lossless image format, whereas JPEG is compressed. TIFF is not. So JPEG can lose some data to it, image. JP2 is slightly higher than TIFF. And then of course, PDF is you know, all know the portable document format. So, and then I had to make sure that the hard copies got sent back to Union City, and then they got stored here at the museum, and they're back in one of our rooms. So, and hopefully we'll keep them. The one digital copy did go to the Union City Library. The digital copy came here, and people that asked me for digital copies did get digital copies. I think it fits on 3 or 4 DVD ROMs, so it's not that difficult to burn. You have a question there, Bruce?
Chat popped up, but it's gone.
All right, let me just do a quick look. All right. Thank you for noticing it. Okay, Paul's question for those in the room here: what were the political leanings of the Oakes family in the editorial coverage? Democrat, Republican, liberal, or very conservative? Did they reflect the political feelings of the community? I'm not too sure. I think from what I've looked at, possibly Republican, but I'm not too sure. I don't think I really, when I've looked at some of our issues, I don't see a leaning one way or the other, but I've never really delved into them to look at editorials. I mostly looked at them for the stories, again, not the editorials. I don't know if they even had editorials. I didn't really look into them that deep. And again, that's what I'm looking for. When I'm going back in history and reading them, I'm more interested in the, I don't have a full copy to show you, but they would, like, the first page would be local news, and the next couple of pages would be something they would buy from somebody else. It would be, you know, you could go buy some world news. You could buy some news, a page that was not has some comics and other things. Maybe a column oriented toward women and some patterns or something like that. You know, it was all not done locally, but pre-canned. You could buy off the shelf and then add it to your newspaper to add filler. So, and sometimes you can notice that the front section, the typesetting was a little loose, wasn't as tight and as professional as the other sections, because they were, you know, they would probably they would do it to a company that would do it, take time to do it, and then send out to like 30, 40, maybe 100 newspapers. So when I was at the independent newspaper, you could buy, you may know the different ads would have like a border to the ad, and then it'd be like then you put text in the middle. Well, you could buy those borders with nothing in the middle, cut them out, and then you add your own text to the middle, and that was an easy way of getting essentially clip art in those days. And you buy this whole binder, nothing but essentially clip art, that you then do a true cut and paste where it was literally cut it out. And then I know that in Livermore, they would run it through a waxer, a warm waxer, and then it would stick to the newspaper and get different layers. Then eventually you'd photograph that and send that off to the print shop. So Paul, I've hopefully answered your question. Yeah, so issues 1938 to 1954, there are some gaps, sometimes as much as a year, and sometimes other gaps. So we got what we got. So I don't know if when they gave them to the city of Union City, if there's any gaps and something happened, but they looked like they came in a big box and no one touched them at the Union City Library. So they're not in the best of shape. Some of the early issues were partially there. You know, it's kind of looking at the Dead Sea Scrolls where it's like a lot of it missing. It's kind of like that. But after the first year, they really start getting into better shape. And the company that did it really did a good job of pulling it off, putting it down, photographing it, scanning it properly. So it all comes across rather well. You can still see some artifacts of where the newspaper was originally folded, and not the best clarity. And so let's go. So the next little section, like the rest of the talk, is looking at issues of the Alvarado Pioneer. Let's take a look at this one's December 16th, 1938. Obviously, this was a fold down the middle at some point. You've got like a crease there. This is Friday. Published weekly in Alvarado, Alameda County. Mrs. George H. Oakes, publisher. Title highlight here is the Sugar Mill beats last year's run of 400,000 sacks. That was news. $36,000 in ice to ship vegetables. There was a Alvarado Vegetable Growers Association. There was a stop called Hall and a siding called Hall. If you ever drive down Alvarado Boulevard and you cross from Union City to Fremont, and you cross the railroad tracks, right? So you've got apartment buildings, the railroad tracks, and then you got this, I want to say retail shop that's still technically Union City. Well, off to the right there, down a little ways, down maybe a quarter mile, eighth of a mile, was where the Hull Railroad stop was. It was called Hull because that was the property of the owner that owned it, was Mr. Hull, John Hull, I believe. And they built a siding later on, built 1878 with the South Pacific Coast Railroad. But later they built a siding because they would pull up cars there, and the Alvarado Growers Association would then start loading up all the vegetables, get the ice in there, and then the railroad would come along and just pull it up. In fact, here we go. Ship 3 calls cauliflower daily at Hall Station. Alvarado Vegetable Growers shipped 3 cars of cauliflower daily. And then Holly bags 620,000 sacks of sugar during the 1938 season. Other Alvarado news. Leslie harvests 250,000 tons of salt this season along the Bay Shore. Leslie Salt, I think they actually had a factory at that time was considered part of Alvarado. It's gone now. If you know where Alameda Creek now, actually, where the flood control channel exits to the bay, you've got Coyote Hills on one side and then Salt Flats on the other. That was originally a slough. It wasn't actually a flood control channel, it was a slough. And there are actually salt factories on there. And then north of there were some salt factories, which over time eventually all combined into Leslie. Also, let's see, we got Alvarado items. Mrs. Winiger is Alvarado visitor. Mrs. Winiger of Oakland is visiting her sister, Mrs. Ed Richmond, through the winter months. Havens Court Baseball 9 plays here December 18th. So obviously, if you're a person of note and you got a visitor from out of town and the newspaper finds out about it, they're gonna talk about it. I don't know if they actually had a gossip column, but I know in some of them they had didn't like a Dakota news section and then the Alvarado news section. It was all, I know that the Union City Leader had Dakota section, and that was all essentially gossip. It's where you maybe get on the telephone tag when people, on the party lines. Yes, question.
You mentioned earlier about the fillers, and I mentioned the News Register. My godmother, Teddy Pereira, was a reporter on the News Register, and I made the paper a number of times as a baby and a toddler for my antics. So, yeah. So, yeah, I'm not surprised that somebody's sister is visiting for the winter. You needed those filler items.
I'll also point out, if you can see it
That's
here,
the gossips.
but look at where it says Doll's Jewelry Store. Store, no E, has splendid gift E at Hayward. So obviously there was a slight problem in getting all the typesetting. I also read later that Mrs. Oaks actually did linotype. She was a typesetter. Do you guys know what linotype is? Where basically it's hot lead, and as you type things away, it actually forms the letters in hot lead and then dumps it into the plate. So whereas the old style was you had 1,000 E's, you had to pull one out and put it in. This way you can just type and it would build them the letters up as you needed in the font size you needed, put it in the plate, you print it, and then you basically melt everything. It was all done with very soft lead. Because you only needed it for a couple print runs, and then you just melt it and reuse it. Similar, probably the type of lead you'd find in lead weights, something of that caliber and that softness. But again, hard enough to at least do some printing, but not permanent. All right. Also, the bottom here, there's a Alvarado Hotel advertisement, a Dakota News, AL or AI Costa busy. AL Costa has been building many homes and making alterations and improvements to Dakota during the past season. Yes.
Price. Can you see the price on there?
I don't see any price listed here as far as what it costs per issue. I don't think it actually is. I haven't seen it anywhere. So let's go ahead and just go to next issue. I think I've got about a dozen issues here. Again, Alvarado cauliflower shipped daily to East. 6 cars daily go east from Alvarado Vegetable Growers Association.
Do you think this was put in as filler or because the farmers and the factories were saying, I mean, this is a source of pride for the area to be shipping out that much.
It reminds me of the Les Nessman Hog Report,
Oh,
you know,
God, yes.
WKRP, where basically, I mean, if you're a farmer, and I mean that back in, you know, Alvarado, I think when at time of incorporation 59, Alvarado had 600 people.
Mhm.
So it was very agricultural. Dakota the same way, very agriculture. So obviously agricultural news is getting very important. And maybe the Growers Association likes to see this in the newspaper. Maybe that's gets people why people subscribe was to see the agricultural stuff. And so, or because they want to see their son or daughter mentioned because of the school play. Here we had talk about here the Vidville or Vaudeville. Oh, is that supposed to be
Guy talking
vaudeville?
about Alvarado.
High school is huge success. Vaudeville,
History.
again, they just spelled it wrong. Unfortunately, I can't, it's too small for me to read here.
No typot letter. And see how many typos you make.
Yes, yes. Also, county trustees to meet Monday in Pleasanton, March 30th, date of Fed Club banquet. New phone books out here soon. Hey, that must have been something nice, you know. Hey, I remember people like being, you know, hey, I'm in the phone book finally. And when you move out on your own, you're in the phone book for once. Let's see, bottom last date to get all out of license, February 5th. So 15 employees at Alvarado. Manager David something says he can't, unfortunately too small for me to read. All right, so we'll go on to the next one. Be sure and vote in primaries, Tuesday, August 27th. This is the August 23rd, 1940 issue. George Paul Oakes, editor, Mrs. George H. Oakes, publisher. Published weekly in Alvarado. Now, notice I said that at this time, roughly 1940, George H. Oakes Sr., I mean, the husband, is actually working in Berkeley. There's a possibility that maybe the Alvarado Pioneer wasn't generating enough income that he needed to have a job somewhere else, and then his wife could then run the Alvarado Pioneer with their son, and the combined income was probably enough for them to live on. I'm going to guess that, because George H. Oakes is never shown as a publisher of this newspaper. The fact that his wife did the linotype, maybe she was the one running the show. Hard to say without going into reading all of this. So what do we got here in the headlines? August May passes away. Anybody know who August May was? August May, his father opened a butcher shop in Alvarado in the 1980s. There was where the Mark Green sports complex is now on Union City Boulevard. That was the Hellwig meat packing facility. August May went into 1912-ish when the Bank of Alvarado was founded. He was the first bank clerk. He eventually moved his way up to president. Sometime in I think in the 30s, there was a robbery, and he was shot in the robbery and lost use of a limb, not one arm or something. He also lived on not Vallejo Street. What? No, you know, it was Vallejo Street in Alvarado with a 1913 new fancy building at the time. And we know because it was in the paper that it's being built. We know exactly when it was built, who built it, and all the details, how long it took. And being an important person is in the paper. So obviously in 1940, he passed away. Hellwig made good supervisor. So there was, wait a second, August, May. Yeah. So May and Hellwig were actually in business together. Hellwig ran the butcher shop. He had two sons, George, and there was another one Philip. Philip, I think, died young. George P. Hellwig became a county supervisor. At that time, supervisors were based on township. So you had 5 supervisors with 5 townships. Eden Township, Washington Township, Murray Township was Pleasanton, Livermore, Brooklyn Township. I can't remember, I think Oakland Township. So we got here also Quist Sisters Open Dress Shop in Hayward. L. George out for supervisor. Lawrence George of Alviso District near Alvarado has been made a post-conciliation campaign to mark the risk supervisor. So maybe it looks like Hellwig took over for L. George, Lawrence George. Who know where Alviso is in Washington Township? There was an Alviso school district. If you go to the corner of Fremont Boulevard and Beard, remember where the old fruit stand was? roughly that area is where the Alviso School District was. That's where the school district house was. It was also a voting district. So it's now obviously part of Fremont. Oh, here we go. Pioneer to install a new cylinder press next week. This is how I learned about it. High school buys press from local paper. Again, newspaper is how I got this information. Who else fails to look at that, read the newspaper? I didn't go back and read every single issue. I kind of went through and read some issues and gleaned some information here. All right. I thought this was interesting. This is so February 28th, 1941. George Paul Oakes editor, Mrs. George H. Oakes publisher, Chamber of Commerce plans big dance for May. And the thing is here is Irvington firemen to hold their annual dance April 19th. This is a picture of the Irvington Fire Department. Now, this is for those who can't see, it's a Mission Revival style building. It's got 2 bays. Mission Revival means it's got the Spanish tile roof. But I don't even know where this building was in Irvington.
Corner by 5 corners?
I really don't know.
It looks vaguely familiar.
Okay. Obviously, this is the second part of the building, not in the picture. That might have been, the firehouse proper where the men were, and this is the garage aspect. They typically had a place for the men to be, and then obviously a garage for the 2 fire trucks. 1941, this was like a late 30s fire truck is closed. The 39 Van Pelt that Alvarado had was open cab, meaning it's totally exposed to the, this is a closed cab, and it could be a late 30s, early 40s fire truck. And again, so Irvington.
Did they go from volunteer to full-time?
I'm not sure for Irvington or Fremont. I know for Union City, it was 1962-ish. About the same time they did the police department.
So if it was anywhere close to that, they didn't have any living quarters at that time.
No, it was based, so the one at Alvarado had just a meeting area and just in a small room, and then you actually had the garage area.
Well, this is a fire station, so you had your trucks,
Uh,
your meeting
right.
area, your kitchen, so,
Right.
and it was volunteer at the time.
Right, so no living spaces, but there was something for them to at least have a desk or do some work other than the garage area. So let's take a look at the next issue. This is March 28, 1941. George Paul Oakes editor, George H. Oakes editor. Alvarado Sanitary District bond election Saturday, March 29th. Let's see. Railroad Commission writes Pioneer regarding recrossing. As Alvarado Chamber of Commerce asks voters to be sure to pass bond Saturday. So in lieu of a city council, your local Chamber of Commerce was kind of where you went to if you had problems. They would then advocate to the county for you. They would talk to the local county supervisor and so on. So if you had some issues, you would talk to the Chamber of Commerce. That's why they're advocating pass a bonds issue because maybe they were sponsoring the bond or had interest in the bond. So another headline here, California Nursery Company Spring Bulb Show continues to April 13th at Niles. There's a picture of showing the daffodils. Silver Dollar softball team is organized, being a Silver Dollar bar. Typically your softball teams or baseball teams are based on either a store, a bar, a company. I know Leslie Salt had a players, and sometimes the minimum would be like 9. They would call them the whatever 9s, Alvarado 9 or the Leslie 9, because that would be the minimum number of players I believe you could get on the field. Not a baseball expert, so don't quote me, but that's what I've seen is the 9. So, and it was something to do in their spare time. A lot of, I'm sure the sugar mill and the salt mill had baseball, and they go play somebody up in Hayward. And I think the Jacinto store sponsored a team for a while. This obviously was softball, so this might be more of an adult league than having employees or something. So let's see here. Let's see. Sponsor the team to represent this end of the township. Hendricks, who played with the Native Sons of the Centerville past 2 seasons, will manage the team for Tony. Tony being Tony Santos. Hendricks, I got an impression that there were a couple people from Alvarado that did go into minor/major leagues. Hendricks might have been one. There was another, can't remember the name right off. I know one of the Nort girls married him. So, all right, let's go into another issue. The late George A. Oakes, 49 years leading Hayward publisher, passed away. When you are the publisher of the newspaper and your father passes away, or father-in-law, you get as much free press as you want. And there's a bio and everything on George A. Oakes, and so on. Oakland Printer, they're saying union meeting and so on. May 30th, 1941, George Paul Oakes, editor. Mrs. George H. Oakes, still publisher, publishing Alvarado. And of course, the masthead is still saying leading vegetable and fruit producing area of California, home of Hollister and Leslie Salt Corporation. And of course, there's not a great photograph, but obviously a photograph of George A. Oakes. So,
Is that an ad there on the front page too?
yes, for fine tailoring, Joe Poheim, Foam, the tailor, Oakland, San Francisco. For Alvarado, and the same thing. Well, if you're in Alvarado, Dakota, your primary shopping was either going to be Hayward or Centerville. And then beyond that, you can go to Oakland or San Jose if you couldn't find it at those other locations. Alvarado wasn't big enough to really have a clothing shop. So Hayward was big enough, and Centerville was big enough to have some clothing retails. Or if not, you go to San Jose or Oakland. I think people sometimes went to San Jose. It might have been a little bit closer than Oakland, I guess. So I do know when the Mervyn's opened, that was in the 50s. That was in San Lorenzo, because I remember the very first Mervyn store was the one in San Lorenzo, because as a kid, I went there because they were the local Boy Scout, Girl Scout shop. If you wanted to buy uniform gear, that's where you went.
Wells and Hayward is where we went to shop.
I was in, well, no, I don't remember going to Capitals. It might have changed. This is late mid-70s, so.
Okay, well, it was before that because when the Fremont Hub opened, and then the fashion center, there was a Capitals in Fremont then, and the Mervyn's and Fremont was big time. But
I remember Capitals. I worked there. So this one is December 19th, 1941. So what happened in December 1941? Start of World War II. So we got Alvarado Air Raid Observation Post, fine work. Donations of coal oil needed for air raid tent. Alvarado News, houses numbered soon. Wow, they actually put house numbers on there. The Alvarado houses will have numbers soon, thanks to Alvarado Chamber of Commerce. Peter Rose's committee will start Sunday, he says, to interview the house owners regarding buying these numbers. It'll be good to look things up in case of fire or disaster in the future. So obviously in 1941, homes didn't have numbers. That's interesting.
you have 600 people living in the area. Everyone knows where everyone lives.
That may not mean buying a number. It means buying the physical number.
Yes,
that's
yes.
not on your.
That's what I'm getting us.
Yeah, it's like.
Yes, you provide your own numbers. So obviously if someone's like, hey, there's a fire and they tell you the person's house, you know who it is, because all the fire department were local, so they knew everything. Chamber of Commerce, re-elects Frank Machado president. I think he was a blacksmith. Sponsor a Boy Scout troop and so on. Sewer work progressing. They were getting a sewer in 1941. Woohoo! State Guard is now not home guard. The California State Guard has been organized to take the place of the California National Guard.
I forgot I had them.
To regulate Army duty last year. I'm hearing somebody.
They were.
Volume up just a little bit. Did someone say something? Guessing not. Okay.
There still is a state guard in addition to the national.
Right, but this is talking about is not the home guard. I know in the 1860s, when during the Civil War, they actually had a home guard in Alvarado, and if you joined it, we actually joined any organization in California, the odds of you go into a war were minimal. They would just keep you here local, and then all the people that were from back east that were serving here were allowed to go back east to fight in the war. That's why there was a group of people here local that wanted to join the Civil War. They actually joined the Massachusetts. They went back east and joined the Massachusetts company instead of joining here, because they would stay here. What else there? Sew for Red Cross. Almost 9 of 10 ladies have been sewing at Old Oddfellows Hall in Alvarado on Wednesdays for the Red Cross. So obviously this is after the declaration of World War II, the attack on Pearl Harbor, and now people are getting ready for things. At that time, they didn't know if Japan was going to invade the US. So that's why they started an Alvarado air raid shelter. And they had people up there observing with binoculars, see, are these planes American? Are they Japanese? What's going on? I think they had them in Alvarado, but eventually they did move the tower out to the sugar factory, because they had plenty of room out there. And they mentioned later in the newspaper output, you can see that people would list how many hours they had. And
Hey, turn them on.
you got an award. One of them in Alvarado had an award for how many hours. Give me 1 second. I think I need to. Yes.
There isn't, then maybe they're not heard.
1 second to get a list here.
I don't want to lose the connection though.
I need to get a list.
Bluetooth's on.
If some people are talking, can you mute yourselves? I'm having a problem getting a list here to mute everyone. Somebody. So if you are talking, please mute. Thank you. All right.
Isabel needs to mute.
Thanks, Paul. All right, next issue. This is February 19th, 1943. Getting some feedback here.
Are they on?
Give me 1 second. Okay, got him muted. All right, so we've got here Frank Dusterberry at Hayward Publishers' 70th birthday affair. Is that the same Dusterberry as Dusterberry of Fremont? I'm not too sure. That sounds reasonable.
Unusual.
Yeah, but it says at Hayward Publishers. Okay. Watchers needed for observation is told to meet at meeting in the Chamber of meeting of Commerce. C.F. Roberts of California says labor canning is essential. And then we got here, I'll get with you in just a second, Paul. See your hand raised. Fred Roberts and George Oakes Jr. He's actually UC graduates, and now also Ensign, George Paul Oakes Ensign. I believe at this time when you went to UC, you actually went through ROTC. It was in Merrill Land Grant School. I learned because I did ROTC there. And of course, now there's, this is in 43. So we've been at war for just under 2 years. Just over, because this is February of 43. They were December 41. So, a year and a half. So obviously, he's in college. He's going ROTC, gets commissioned. Now he's going to go and do active duty. Well, here's the words. All hours served on Alvarado Post. I'm assuming that is the tower. Officials on Alvarado Observation Post. Charles Gonzalez, 120 hours. Who's the highest one here? Frank Pinto, 377 hours. I think I interviewed his wife. And there's Annette, 182. I think I actually interviewed Annette Pinto a while back. Wallace McKeon, Flora McKeon, another well-known family in that area. The Jacinto, Joseph and Joseph Jr. Jacinto. Jacinto's owned a grocery store. Manuel Rose, Joseph Rose. Rose family is also from that area, and Silva's. So, all right, Paul, you want to unmute and ask your question? I'll turn up the my speaker so I can hear you.
Oh, I just wanted to comment on Frank Dusterberry because he was the first manager of the Centerville Bank that later became Bank of America. And Dusterberry Way, where the DMV is in Fremont, is named after him. And coincidentally tied in with ACWD, where he was a director. His wife inherited the Centerville Water Company from her father when he passed away. And the board of directors at the Alameda County Water District did not want to have a woman on the board, which she was trying to persuade them that she belonged on the board. And in the end, they made Frank Dusterberry, her husband, the additional board member.
All right. So what time does he was he at the Bank of Centerville? Roughly?
This is right around the late 30s, early 40s.
Okay, because that would have been the building that is now the Computer World, because the very first bank was 1900-ish, I think, going from memory. And it was a little bit later, they built the Italianate next to Peralta, but then they moved Peralta.
Yeah,
Go
the
ahead.
E.H. Stevenson building was right next to the bank, and that was where both the water district and the sanitary district had their meetings.
That was on
the
the right-hand side, if you're looking at the bank buildings on the right-hand side.
Yes,
Okay,
and,
that actually,
that large redwood table sits in the lobby of the Alameda County Water District, where both boards had their meetings.
okay.
Just thought I'd add that in.
What's interesting is that the Stevenson building got demolished and became a bank building in, I want to say, the 50s. I'm trying to go back to my Centerville walking tour. Then now the thing eventually became the Color Me Mine. I'm not sure what it is now, but you know.
No, I think you're right. You're absolutely right.
But it was, so one of the gentlemen on a couple of years ago on the walking tour said, "Oh yeah, my dad worked at the bank. I remember being there as a kid." So, all right, let's see what else is here in the newspaper. Cash raised from Alvarado merchants for air raid tower. So everyone was chipping in for the war. 17-year-olds eligible for Marine Corps. So if you're 17, you could join the Marine Corps without your parent, I'm guessing without your parents' permission, and off you'd go. This is February 19th, 1943. So we've been at war for a while.
At the beginning of the war, it was 21, and then later on during the war, they changed it to 18.
Here they're saying 17-year-olds are eligible.
They always make exceptions.
Yep. And then, of course, I think the reason that George P. Oakes didn't go in because he was in college going through ROTC. In fact, I just noticed on his hat, it says USN ROTC. So obviously, you know, and then he was, you know, got his commission and then away he went. Just like the folks that were at the West Point didn't go act to do. They were, you know, they needed officers to let them go through West Point and then commission and get them into the war. So they mentioned, I remember in Band of Brothers, they asked one guy, when you get commissioned? What was it, June 6, 19? Oh, D-Day. Okay. So the next issue is on Thursday, November 5th, 1953. And we've got here Southern Pacific Passenger Service. Southern Pacific Passenger Service from Newark to San Jose. I'm not sure. I know Alvarado did have passenger service, but I don't know exactly who was. It used to be the South Pacific Coast Railroad. I don't know who picked up later. It wasn't, probably finished sometime in the 50s. And then the rail station got demolished sometime in the 60s or so. County traffic expert outlines action to cut into into auto mishaps. Fair exhibitors receive awards. Oh, here we go. Big news. Newark man proves good fisherman. He's got a big fish there. You can see it all right there. For those who can't see it, I can't use a projector, so I'm having to kind of read these things. People can't see it on the monitor. Mr. and Mrs. Codero go on tour of Hawaiian Islands via Transocean Airlines. I think the guy in the middle there might actually be George Oakes, but I'm not too sure. Because it talks about Corbin and some other people. George H. Oakes is purchasing 2 tickets to tour to Hawaii for Al Codero, won in the subscription contest of the Washington News recently. So obviously something happened in Washington News, but they're reporting the Alvarado Pioneer because they own both. So why not you advertise one and the other? So, and also since these are weeklies, limited publications, I want to say somewhere online, the Library of Congress listed the Alvarado Pioneers having like a circulation of maybe less than 300 or something. So these weren't large newspapers. These are local, and the only people who really got them were locals. You didn't really have the libraries getting these newspapers so that they can archive them later. Maybe the local library did, but then they didn't, but that was, you know, so Alvarado and Dakota libraries, maybe something happened on the way to becoming the Union City Library. So, all right. Benefit dance Saturday, November 7th in Newark Pavilion. So by 1953, the Newark Pavilion existed. That was good. Notice this, I'm not seeing any masthead here, who the publisher. It just says volume 22, 1953, but it's got to be older than that. So let's look at another issue. Alvarado Pioneer, this is February 18th, 1954. Wait a second, let me go back one. There says volume 22. Here says volume 22. This is November 53, February 54. Nope, no volume number there. All right. So I'm trying to figure out by volume number how old it is, but I'm not too sure. Oh, here you go. Roding sells land for homes. George C. Roding of California Nursery Company informed us Wednesday that at the selling of acreage west of Rock Avenue, adjoining the nursery for a big home development, which eventually means $2.5 million development, $15,000 homes are to be built by Curtis Home Builders of Hayward. Can't even buy a car these days for that price. So, so if you own a home in California, by Niles, not the nursery, and it was built by Curtis Homes, it probably cost $15,000. It was sold in the land was sold in 1954. So if you're doing research on the Roding family, that's useful. Who's the picture of? Grandmaster to visit. Okay, February 25th, Mission Peak Lodge, IOF, will have an official visit from Grandmaster Edward A. Sully. I believe Mission Peak Lodge is the one in Irvington, which is still active, last I heard. A lot of the other local lodges were no longer active. The Alvarado Lodge deactivated, moved to Hayward. The Hayward Lodge deactivated, and everything then moved into the Irvington Lodge. So, for Oddfellows. But I believe someone has recently reactivated the Hayward Oddfellows, I think. Kiwanis received Scout Charter. All right. Here we go. Alvarado News. Patricia M. Nolan, reporter, attending the birthday party for Genevieve Bazolis last week from Alvarado, where Mrs. Esther Gardetto, Arnold Gardetto, Mr. and Mrs. Andy Gardetto. So if you're at newspaper, you've had a birthday party in the newspaper, have you noticed a brand new Buick? The beautiful 1954 Buick, which is blue and cream, is owned by Raphael and Evelyn Silva. Good luck with your new car, Silvas. So that's the kind of stuff that would go into the newspapers. And I'm sure if you were local, that was nice to have. Of course, if it was a brand new car, you don't want to tell people, maybe you don't want to tell people about it, they'd steal it, but yeah. $4 million valuation hike seen for Alviso and annexation. Proposed annexation of the Alviso area to the Union Sanitary District will bring the total assessed values to the district to $13,849,000, whatever, increase of nearly $4 million over the last year. So that's Alviso adding to the USD. Bill Short named new president of Centerville Chamber of Commerce. Again, Chamber of Commerce are important back days. Now, Chamber of Commerce does something no one ever knows because no one really follows what the Chamber of Commerce does. But in those days, Chamber of Commerce is active and you didn't have any issues. You go to the Chamber of Commerce, they work sort of like the local city council in a way. They were your go-to guys. They could help you go to the county supervisor. And how many more issues are left? I think this might actually, nope, one more issue. Here we go. I think this is the last one. This is the one that I thought was interesting. So let's talk about this. Alvarado Pioneer, vote Alvarado School Tax Friday. Author Alvarado by Pat Noya. Catholic Girls Recollection Day, April 3rd. I'm not sure what Recollection Day is. Science Fair winners. Notice the hats they're wearing. Patterson Bernardo Poultry win. Water District Director's election returns. All right, here we go. WB Patterson won with 1,256 votes. MJ Bernardo, 1,183 votes. Jack Prouty, 975 votes. And IM Pata, 755 votes. So I think Patterson and Bernardo might be on the board. But the big thing here is nine injured in crash near Centerville. I also ran, I didn't think I actually had it here, there was another issue, the talk about paper here of a plane crashing 4 miles north of Dakota. If you go and look at the aircraft aviation safety network, they list as crash was in 4 miles west of Dakota, and mentioned they hit a hill. There are no hills west of Dakota, so I'm assuming it was north of Dakota, 4 miles, which would put it properly in Hayward, depending on where they define Dakota as. The northern section of Dakota was actually part of Dakota, was actually what was then considered the northern part of Dakota got annexed by Hayward back in the 50s. That's why, so Dakota didn't actually have a boundary. The only boundaries were Dakota School District and Dakota Fire District. So that's why there is a one elementary school in Hayward that's part of the New Haven Unified School District, because New Haven Unified came out of the Dakota and Alvarado school districts. So you got one little area that in Hayward that doesn't vote for the Hayward Unified, but only votes for New Haven Unified. Long drawn out story there. Other headline here, National Guard, big welcome. At the Centerville Chamber of Commerce meeting Monday, the wonderful reception of the National Guard. Thursday was commented on. National Guard thanked and so on. Irvington Chamber of Commerce Ladies Night at Hawaii Gardens. Township Chamber of Commerce names committee members. Dakota Union Sewer discussed merger. That's interesting. So how does Union Sanitation get, I'm guessing Union Sanitation was talked about Alviso. That was maybe the last one. And now we're talking about Dakota and Union Sewer. So I think Union Sewer might have been the Alvarado Sewer. So, all right. And let me make sure that's it. That is, I believe, the last slide. About 8:15, not bad. So just over an hour. All right. So I'm going to actually open it up for questions. If you want a question, you're online, go ahead and ask away, unmute yourself and ask away. I have the volume turned up here. So if you got any questions on what we talked about. All right, I'll ask anybody in here, in the room here. You say, I'll probably mention it.
Quick point, earlier in the conversation, we talked about the Native Sons of the Golden West. There's an affiliate, the Native Daughters of the Golden West. They are active. They have a museum at Columbia, and the offices in San Francisco on 414 Mason Street. I've been there, they're not far from Moscone. And they are having active events on the web, and Piedmont, Oroville, and Sonoma. So these are at-least chapters here.
So for those who didn't hear, John was commenting that there's an associate organization with the Native Sons of the Golden West called the Native Daughters of the Golden West. I'll say Women's Auxiliary or something. And they're still active and have locations in Columbia and San Francisco and events and a few
Most
other
of the events, the museum is in Columbia.
museums in Columbia, and then
And their main offices.
in San Francisco. All right. So, because I'm sure how people can hear you not here, so I want to make sure people can hear that. So any other questions inside here? Any other questions online?
Looking at this last issue, and it has 7 columns across. And how they had to
Six.
abbreviate the like Patterson.
Yeah, 6 columns. Yes, because Patterson was too large in that particular font. Notice this, Patterson, Bernard, Prouty, and then to fit Win, they had to change the font size to fit it in there. So this is stuff was done on the fly. That's where you can tell the very first page was done locally. I don't have other pages, but if you go look at the other ones, oh, just, I remember Al Menard asked, there are no online issues of the Alvarado Pioneer. We have copies here on DVD and ROM. I have a personal copy because I was going to help get it organized. I know the Union City Library has a copy on DVD ROM. If they know where it's at, I have no idea. I haven't talked to that library people in a long time. They may have lost it, but I do have a copy if someone wants issues. We have a gentleman named Anthony Gualco who did a lot of research in Alvarado. I actually sent him copies, and he went through and annotated a bunch of stuff. So I think it fits on 4 DVD ROMs. It could be, if you want everything, if you want just the PDFs, it'll probably fit on only 1 DVD ROM, which is about 4 gig. So it's possible. I'm going to try and work with the California Digital Newspaper POS or whatever. Because I think I've contacted them once before, and they're like, "Oh, we don't have funds to scan those." No. They're already scanned. I want to give you digital copies if you put them online. So they're just these people ask them, "Please scan these, please scan it." No, we've already paid the money to scan them. I just want to give you digital copies, but I haven't really heard back from them. So, yes,
She's
Bruce.
Right, it looks like
Yeah,
it is
there's
7 columns.
Right, and I
Isn't that
didn't remember-
unusual?
Yeah, I didn't remember the previous issues.
I'm
Down
counting.
at the bottom of down at the bottom, okay? 7 columns.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You're right. Okay, I can't count. You're right.
So is that unusual?
I really don't know. Let's go back.
see if the other one, I think they were only 6 columns.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 columns there. 2, 3, 4.
That's the standard.
That's wide, so I'm not going to count. That could be 3, but yeah, it's about 7.
That one's
That
almost
was
6. That was 6.
Huh.
1, 2, 3, 4,
Six.
5, 6, 6. So at some point they changed from 5, 6. There's a possibility, if we hit the 50s, that they had more, or they had, no, by 54, they had more news to fit into the newspaper, and it's expensive to add pages where it's easier to shrink the font size or add columns. So there's a possibility that adding an additional page would cost them money. I don't know, I think it was like $3 or something like that, those days for subscription. It wasn't a whole lot, but back then, that might have been a lot. I remember my father saying in the early 60s, he was making $2 an hour, and I thought it was a good wage. So $3 a year might have been a fair bit of money. So I think that's roughly what it ran. I don't know what this also, it says it was, you can, so I don't know if they delivered them. They might have mailed them out and let the mail do the delivery. You might have gotten copies at your local certain stores, like the Tri-City Voice. Tri-City Voice now is a subscription, and you can get them at various places, pick them up. Since I mentioned that one, by post office at Niles, they were probably delivered with the newspaper and cheaper than getting a paper boy.
Did they actually deliver mail? Or did everybody go to the post office to get it?
That I do not know. I don't know the history. I don't think the Alvarado post office, no, I don't know how many post boxes there are in Alvarado. I know in the 80s and 90s in Wickenburg, Arizona, they were still going to the post office. My mother lived there. And then they moved to house delivering. People were upset because that was the event of the day. Go to the post office. Hey, how's it going, Ralph? How's it going, Sally? Let's talk a bit. That was your meeting place. But it could have been delivered. If the postman goes out, and then think about the old post box and the newspaper box kind of thing. And so I really don't know if there was a delivery at all or not. I see a chat here. So let me go. Yeah, Kel, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question, or do you want to type it in? Either way will work.
No, I just wanted to let you know. I didn't want to just jump in. So I've been reading lots and lots of copies of this newspaper while I've been at the museum doing volunteer work, and I love it. I've just been eating it up. It's fascinating to me that the front page can have ads for Cocker Spaniel puppies, political editorials on not to vote for Roosevelt or you'll never get Social Security. The whole system will collapse. Dry cleaning ads. And then I also noticed that there's no stories to be continued on another page. So my guess is the driving force on it is not so much divided up into sections as just what fit. They just laid things out to see which ads would fit, which articles would fit. But I don't know that for sure, and I don't know whether or not anything that you've looked into shows that.
Seems reasonable, but I think our question, we're going from 6 to 7, might have just had more stuff to talk about. Yes. And more, well, yeah, it started in 1928. I know 600 people officially in Alvarado in 1959 when incorporated. It's got to be less than that early. I don't know what the census were. I haven't memorized them earlier than that. Because I only researched from 59 on because I was doing the incorporation of Union City. I'm sure it wasn't a whole lot. Plus, so 1880 census of Alvarado, 25% of the population was Chinese. I'm guessing they didn't read newspapers. Granted, it was started in the 20s, but I think by the 20s, you started getting Japanese in the town. You can tell that by the census would list ethnic groups, and most of the Chinese and Japanese were living in boarding houses because they're primarily men and they were workers. So you can see all listed, all grouped together in a boarding house. The Matsumoto family actually had a boarding house, and the Matsumoto family also had a contracting service. They advertised it, hey, you need Japanese workers, you come talk to me. Because he owned a local store, he was well known in the community, so he stepped up and became they call him, funny enough, the major domo of the Japanese of Alvarado. Major domo, I believe, is a Spanish term. Something like a quality, but not quite. So that was the term they used at the time, was a major domo of the Japanese in Alvarado. So, and as the Chinese aged out, you started getting other ethnic groups like the Chinese. Chinese couldn't actually emigrate until like 1910-ish thereabouts. And then the Chinese, by that time, the Chinese already aged out or moved on. There weren't many Chinese families. It was all old, probably men. And then by the 20s, started getting Filipinos coming into Alvarado. All right, any other questions online? Okay, actually, Kel, since you read about it, what articles did you find interesting that you in Pioneer that you could bring up?
So to be perfectly honest with you, as I alluded to the Roosevelt political editorial, and I did find that fascinating. It was a whole vote Republican because
You suddenly cut off, Kel.
ads. I love reading the ads, and I highly recommend anybody who's at the museum. We have lots and lots of copies of these, is to go by and grab a few. They will shed all over your car because they fall apart in your hands, but it is super fun to read these.
And if you really want to read them, I do recommend also the digital copy. Doesn't take me long to burn a copy if someone wants to look at them. Because I don't want to deal with the physicals too much because, again, like you said, they shed, they fall apart. The digital is probably what I'd recommend. Again, I can burn a CD-ROM. Just let me know. Everyone should know how to contact me. I think it costs $1 or less to burn a DVD. I bought a bunch of DVD-ROMs, so not a big deal. All right. So we were at 8:25. That's not bad. I think we can end the meeting. Do we have anything else we want to talk about business-wise or? All right. So I'll go ahead
Thank you.
and end the meeting. I'll end the recording. Eventually we'll have the recording up on YouTube. Posted a link to it on our website. We posted and links to YouTube. We were keeping them stored on Zoom, but that costs us money. YouTube is free, so that's why we've been putting them lately. So let me go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to say stop recording, stop video. Oh, where's recording? Hope it recorded everything. Well, I guess we'll find out soon enough. All right. Thank you very much. Bye.